let's see. Now I can bring him in. Okay.
Okay.
Here we are.
Yeah, I had a connection glitch.
Okay. So what does this say about the Western world? Because America is the strongest pillar and the most influential Western nation. If the pillar, we know that if you build a house, you have this weight bearing load pillar, and if that pillar is damaged or collapsed, the whole house is no longer where you can live in. What does that say about Europe and the Western world when this thing happens in America with the decline of her dollar? Which I have a friend, and I have to say this, I have a friend that works on the largest port. He's a manager on one of the lines on the largest port in California, in the United States. And he would send me pictures showing me ships as far as the eye can see, just out in the water. And he was saying, man, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it was just $1 million just for those ships to dock out there for one day. And they had been out there for weeks on weeks. And he also said some of the containers were not being unloaded. And he said he speculated that was something due to the process of payments. And also some of the containers that were being loaded on were empty. So there's something going on that they're not telling us economically. And if this is a premonition or a shadow or forethought of what is coming to America, what does that say about the colonial powers of Europe that depend on America to project their power and to protect their economic stranglehold over Africa and Eurasia and Asia?
Well, that's a big question. I don't know about the container ships, but it's true that as the U.S. empire collapses and the dollar loses its purchasing power, we would expect a lot fewer imports coming into the United States on those container ships. And prices will rise accordingly. And so people in the United States will have a lower standard of living. And as for the Europeans, they have benefited to some extent from the U.S. empire, but they've also suffered from it. The arrangements that the U.S. empire has made for currency and trade benefit the U.S. Well, I guess Israel, in a sense, is the parasite or the tail that wags the dog. In a sense, it's been benefiting the most. But the United States has also benefited from these currency arrangements that are designed to allow the U.S. to basically print the global reserve currency and therefore print as much as it wants and spend as much as it wants to have a military that dominates the world and put all these 900 military bases all over the world. So that's what the U.S. has been doing. Europe has gone along with it because Europe is occupied by the U.S. The U.S. has military bases in Europe too, so Europe can't rebel even if it wants to. The American NSA is bugging all the European leaders, like Merkel was famously bugged, but they all are, of course. So all of their secrets are known to the American leadership, so they can't really rebel. Europe has been occupied, and the U.S. has given the Europeans a better deal than African countries and probably most Middle Eastern and Asian countries, but not as good a deal as the Americans and, of course, the Israelis. So the Europeans have something to gain as well as something to lose from the collapse of the U.S. empire. The U.S. empire has basically been parasitical, and it's been extracting wealth from the whole world on behalf of a global renter class of neoliberal parasites that are living on these rents or interests rather than actually producing anything. And the new Chinese model is one of you have to actually produce something in return for your wealth. And they're trying to build this Belt and Road Initiative to bring the Eurasian continent together. And ultimately, Africa will be part of that too. It already is to some extent. And the promise would be a slightly more just world, where instead of this neoliberal philosophy imposing austerity on ordinary people in order to protect the usury profits of the billionaires who run the whole show, you would have a system that allowed ordinary people to get a bigger share of what's produced. And Europeans probably will benefit from that in some ways, as will people in other parts of the world. So I think there's a promise of actually a more just world as the U.S. empire declines, not so much because the U.S. itself is bad or evil, but just because the U.S. empire has been operating on behalf of a parasitical, kind of usury-based capitalist bankster class.